You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Wednesday evening, folks. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to my program, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. And of course, you can come over and watch the video simulcast over on my YouTube channel, and that's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. And tonight we're going to have a couple of graphics, so if you're just listening audibly on the radio, you're going to miss the visuals. I'll describe them well verbally. But if you want to catch them, come on over and listen to the simulcast. And you can also catch it in archive over on my YouTube channel. And also, if you come over live, you get to join the live chat room with the other Intrepids, talking all the way through this program, sometimes about the show, sometimes about things absolutely unrelated to the show. But for the most part, I think that you're going to enjoy it if you come on over. So come on over to my YouTube channel. And also, that's it. Other than, I want to promote the t-shirt again. I'm just going to throw it up here really quick. If you want to get a t-shirt, here it is. Let's find it. Boom. There's the hoodie version of the Intrepid radio program t-shirt. And here is the t-shirt itself in kind of the blue, steely blue color, and you can also get that in black. And so come on over to my Etsy page. That's Etsy, E-T-S-Y, Etsy.com/shop/Mr. Scotty. No. Back that up. I say that so often. Etsy.com/shop/son of a patriot. That's my site over at Etsy. So come on over, get yourself a shirt, and I think you'll enjoy it. If you enjoy this show, you can now wear it. And Audrey or somebody is going to put the link up over in the chat room, too, if you want to see that. So thanks in advance, and thanks for being here tonight. I want to start our show a little unconventionally. As you know, I don't like to get into current affairs and politics so much on this show. Because I do that with Rocky over on the Situation Room, which airs about 2 hours later than this show airs. Exactly 2 hours later. You can catch it live, at least this week, in the mornings at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. Then it rebroadcasts at 11 p.m. Central Standard Time. And so watch your clocks accordingly there. But today, I've got a little something about the coronavirus, which I'm so tired of hearing about. Not that we shouldn't be aware of what's going on. That's not why I'm tired of it. I'm tired of the politics wrapped around it. And every time I open up my email, every time I open up my messenger, which is several times a day, there are all kinds of videos and things that people send me. And that's great, folks. If you want to communicate with me, that's perfectly fine. That's why I'm there, so you can communicate with me. But I get really tired of all the different videos, of all the different versions, of all the different opinions, and all the different this and that and brick and brack and other things. And so I try to avoid it. I hate the topic. We know what we're supposed to be doing. We know we're supposed to be isolating. But there are questions, of course, on all of that, the politics behind it and all of that. I'm all for opening up the economy, by the way. I think President Trump is doing the right thing in pushing towards trying to get the economy open. And there are reasons behind that which I'm not prepared to talk to in full tonight. I will say this, though, the question of, are people going to die if we open up the economy? Yeah, probably. By coronavirus. Yeah, probably. Will people die by coronavirus if we don't open up the economy? Yeah, probably. What is worse is the question. There's going to be deaths. There's big debate over death versus quality of life versus numbers of years lost. And this is an actual debate that's going on out there amongst, and I don't have their names in front of me, but believe me, we'll hit this again, and I'll give you a little more detail, maybe on Rocky's show. But there is a debate going on over the highest percentage of people dying are those who are already sick, already have compromised systems, already only have a year or two left at best. This is the generalization that's being made. And so they're saying if somebody is to die, would you prefer somebody dying with 20 to 40 to 60 years of life that they should have had, or somebody that has a year of life they should have had? We don't want anybody to die. But what they're trying to do is figure out this is where you have to step outside the box and dispassionately look at, does the economy being down actually in the long run hurt more people, or does the coronavirus? And it's only because it's a fact that's on the table in front of us. We have to deal with what happens. Who's going to die? When are they going to die? Are we death brokers or life brokers if we decide to stay quarantined or open up the economy? No. There has to be decisions made based on good information, based on how we can control the virus, and all of that. So again, not prepared to have a full discussion on this morning, because I have not armed myself with a lot of facts. I just have snippets. So while that's going on, let's take that whole debate and push it aside. And I want to look at something new that I found here online that talks about the coronavirus and the claim, and this is through Live Science, the claim that it didn't escape from a lab. And here's how they know. They're saying it wasn't a manufactured virus that escaped a lab. Now, there might be politics behind this, I don't know, but I was going to present you with this information. But they are saying, the ubiquitous they, and I'll mention some of the people who were involved in this, are saying that the persistent myth that it escaped from a lab can be put to death. So now, as the novel coronavirus causing COVID-19 spreads across the globe, with cases surpassing 284,000 worldwide as of March 20th, now this is almost a month ago this article was written, misinformation is spreading almost as fast, and one persistent myth is that the virus, called SARS-CoV-2, was made by scientists and escaped from a lab in Wuhan, China, where the outbreak began. Now, a new analysis of the SARS-CoV-2 may finally put that latter idea to bed. There's a group of researchers compared the genome of this novel coronavirus with the 7 other coronaviruses that are known to humans. And by the way, yes, the coronavirus has been around for a long time. If you pick up a can of Lysol spray, it even says right on the back, and it always has, that it also kills certain types of coronavirus. But not the COVID-19. That's the updated version. And so a group of researchers, they compared the genome of the novel coronavirus with these 7 other coronaviruses that we already know of to infect human. SARS, MERS, the SARS-CoV-2, which can cause severe disease, along with HKU1. I don't know if any of you know what these are, but I'll read them off. HKU1, NL63, OC43, and 229E, which typically cause just mild symptoms. Now, I've probably had some of these. I remember going in a couple of years ago to my doctor because I had that persistent cough after having what I thought was the flu, and he rattled off one of these and said, yeah, you'll have this for about 6 weeks. And sure enough, it passed. And so these things, some of these things cause mild symptoms compared to COVID-19. And so the researchers wrote March 17th in the Journal of Nature Medicine. They said, our analysis clearly shows that SARS-CoV or CoV-2 is not a laboratory construct or a purposefully manufactured or manipulated virus. And this is what they wrote in the journal. And Christian Anderson, an associate professor of immunology, microbiology at the Scripps Research, and his colleagues looked at the genetic template for the spike proteins that protrude from the surface of the virus. And you've all seen pictures of the virus. Just go look one up and you'll see it. I could have thrown one up here, but I didn't. They looked at the spiked surface, and the coronavirus uses three spikes, or these spikes, to grab the outer walls of its host's cells, and then it enters those cells. And they specifically looked at the gene sequences that are responsible for two key features of these spike proteins. The grabber, called the receptor binding domain, that hooks into the host cells, and the so-called cleavage site, and see, now it's got my interest, that allows the virus to open and enter those cells. And so that analysis, that the hook part of the spike had evolved to target a receptor on the outside of human cells called ACE2 or ACE2, which is involved in blood pressure regulation. And it's so effective at attaching to human cells that the researchers said the spike proteins were the result of, get this, natural selection. That's like evolution, and not genetic engineering. Remember all the talk, I don't know how related this is, but this pops into my head. All the talk we had of how our civilization, we have evolved to the place where we have all these vaccines and things we can do. And are the viruses and the illnesses and the germs all going to evolve themselves past what the predator, the vaccine, does to kill it? And we say, hey, we're going to soon, one of these days we're going to be overtaken by the viruses because they'll have evolved past what we can do to do anything about them. And then we have to evolve and come up with some other weapon or attack to kill them. And so this test, the testing they've been doing, the research they're doing, is saying that the actual COVID-19 virus is a product of natural selection, something that has evolved past our ability to inoculate against it. And so we've got to develop something different. So here's why. The SARS-CoV-2, CoV-2, is very closely related to the virus that causes severe acute respiratory syndrome, and that's SARS. We've already been aware of that. And that fanned across the globe nearly 20 years ago. And scientists have studied how SARS-CoV differs from SARS-CoV-2 with several key letter changes in the genetic code. Yet in computer simulations, the mutations in SARS-CoV-2 don't seem to work very well at helping the virus bind to human cells. If scientists had deliberately engineered this virus, they wouldn't have chosen mutations that computer models suggest won't work. But it turns out nature's smarter than science. Go figure that one out. And smarter than scientists. And the novel coronavirus found a way to mutate that was better and completely different from anything scientists could have created. And this is what the study found. So, and I hope this isn't too... There are certain things I like to listen to, certain things I hate listening to. I hate listening to shows about medical stuff. I hate listening to shows about, human crisis and things like that. There are deeper things I like, and maybe this is one of those shows where you go, oh my God, is this whole show going to be about scientific stuff about the virus? No, it's not. I'm just introducing tonight with this. And so any nail in the escaped from the evil lab theory, or another nail in that coffin, that it's escaped from the lab theory. The overall molecular structure of this virus is distinct from the known coronaviruses, and instead most closely resembles viruses found in bats and pangolins that had been very little studied up to this point and never known to cause humans any harm at all. So if someone were seeking to engineer a new coronavirus as a pathogen, they would have constructed it from the backbone of a virus known to cause illness. And that's according to a statement from Scripps. And where did the virus come from? The research group came up with two possible scenarios for the origin of what we're now experiencing with the SARS-CoV-2 in humans. And one scenario follows the origin stories for a few other recent coronaviruses that have wreaked havoc in human populations. And in that scenario, we contracted the virus directly from an animal. Civets in the case of SARS, and camels in the case of Middle East Respiratory System, that's the MERS. And in the case of SARS-CoV-2, the researchers suggest that that animal may have been a bat, which transmitted the virus to another intermediate animal, possibly a pangolin, or some scientists have said that brought the virus to humans. Now, in that possible scenario, the genetic features that make the new coronavirus so effective at infecting human cells, its pathogenic powers, would have been in place before hopping to humans, if it were lab created. In other scenarios, those pathogenic features would have evolved only after the virus jumped from its animal host to humans. Some coronaviruses that originated in pangolins have a hook structure, that receptor binding domain, similar to that of the SARS-CoV-2. In that way, a pangolin either directly or indirectly passed its virus onto the human host. Or a pangolin. I don't know if the G is hard or soft. So then once inside a human host, the virus could have evolved to have its other stealth feature, the cleavage site that lets it easily break into human cells. And so once it developed that capacity, the researchers said the coronavirus would have been even more capable of spreading between people. And all of this technical detail now could help scientists forecast the future of this pandemic. And so if the virus did enter human cells in a pathogenic form, that raises the probability of future outbreaks. The virus could still be circulating in the animal population and might again jump to humans, ready to cause an outbreak. But the chances of such future outbreaks are lower if the virus must first enter the human population and then evolve the pathogenic properties. This is what the researchers have all said about this. So there you go. The idea that this was created in the lab is probably very remote. And it would probably be more terrifying if it were. Because it would skip over all the different in-between stages that it would need to get there. So there you go. There is the a little bit of a skinny on the development of coronavirus. Now, I also have in front of here, have you ever looked up the 20 of the worst epidemics and pandemics in human history that we know of in more recent history? Some of it's ancient, though. Recorded history, that's what I'm looking for. Plagues and epidemics have ravaged humanity throughout its entire existence, often changing the course of history when it happens. Has the coronavirus as we know it today, has that changed the course of history for us? For lots of people it has. Has it changed the way we will do things in the future? Yeah. And so throughout the course of history, disease outbreaks have ravaged humanity, and sometimes changing the course of history, and at times signaling the end of entire civilizations. Now, here's 20. I'm going to give you 20 in the next, what do we got here? We got about only a few minutes left. We'll just rattle through these. And here are 20 of the worst epidemics and pandemics dating from prehistoric to modern times. Prehistoric, around 3000 BCE. About 5,000 years ago, an epidemic wiped out a prehistoric village in China. China again. The bodies of the dead were stuffed inside a house that was later burned down, and no age group was spared, as the skeletons of juveniles, young adults, middle-aged people were found inside the house. And the archaeological site is now called Hamanmanga, and is one of the best preserved prehistoric sites in northeastern China. An archaeological and anthropological study indicates that the epidemic happened quickly enough there was no time for proper burials, and the site was not ever inhabited again. And before the discovery of Hamanmanga, other prehistoric mass burial sites that date to roughly the same time period were found at a site called Miazungu in northeastern China. And together, all these discoveries suggest that an epidemic ravaged the entire region. You've got the plague of Athens that was 430 BCE. Not long after a war between Athens and Sparta began, an epidemic ravaged the people of Athens and lasted for 5 years. Some estimates put the death toll as high as 100,000 people. That's back before there were a lot of people, comparatively speaking, like we have today. The Greek historian Thucydides wrote that the people in good health were all of a sudden attacked by violent heats in the head and redness and inflammation in the eyes. The inward parts, such as the throat or tongue, became bloody, emitting an unnatural and fetid breath. I can only imagine. So what exactly this epidemic was has long been a source of debate among scientists. A number of diseases have been put forward as possibilities, including typhoid fever, Ebola, and many scholars believe the overcrowding caused by the war exacerbated the epidemic. And Spartan's army was stronger, forcing the Athenians to take refuge behind a series of fortifications called the Long Walls that protected their city. And despite the epidemic, the war continued on, not ending until 404 BCE, when Athens was forced to capitulate to Sparta. So that epidemic went on for about 25 years. You've got the Antonine Plague. That was 165 to 180. Soldiers returning to the Roman Empire from campaigning brought this plague with them. And I'm trying to see if there were numbers here. It ended the Pax Romana, and which was a period from 27 to 180, when Rome was at the height of its power. And instability grew throughout the regions, civil wars and invasions by barbarian groups. Christianity became increasingly popular the time after the plague occurred. And you had the plague of Cyprian, and that was AD 250 to 271, named after Saint Cyprian, a bishop of Carthage, who described the epidemic as signaling the end of the world. We haven't heard that one before, have we? That was almost 2,000 years ago. They were saying the same thing about epidemics. It's the homosexuals. I doubt that's what they said, but that's what some guys are saying today. And then you had the plague of Justinian in 541 AD. You had the Black Death, which we know of, 1346 to 1353. We all have heard about the Black Death, the plague, all throughout Europe. The Kaklozititi, I can't even pronounce it, Kakolizliti epidemic, 1545. This was, I think this was in the Aztec world. Killed off a lot of them. A recent study that examined the DNA from the skeletons of victims found that they were infected with a subspecies of Salmonella, known as S. Paratyphi, which causes fever and so on. Then you had the American plagues in the 16th century, cluster of Eurasian diseases brought to the Americans, to the Americas, and it helped the Spanish force led by Hernan Cortés conquer the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. I can't ever pronounce those names. I know Tegucigalpa, but that's yeah. You had the Great Plague of London in 1665. We know of that one, the Black Death's last major outbreak. The plague of Marseille, the Russian plague in the 1700s. Philadelphia yellow fever in colonial America. The flu pandemics in 1880s and 90s in America. The American polio epidemic in 1916. FDR was a victim of that. The Spanish flu in 1918. The Asian flu. The AIDS epidemic. The H1N1 swine flu. The West African Ebola. Zika virus. All of these are things that we have seen, we've heard throughout history, some we've lived through. So I think we'll live through this one, but be prepared for things to change up a little bit. Anyway, we're at the end of our segment. We'll be back and we're going to talk a little bit about Atlantis. Sit tight and stay tuned. All right, folks, we're back. Thanks for hanging on during the break. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. And you can listen to the simulcast. Odyssey, ODYSY1.com to check out all the goodness that is Odyssey, find out all the outlets where this show plays. You can also come over and watch the video simulcast on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Join the Intrepids in the live chat there. You'll have a good time. Have a fun time getting to know people and discussing what we're talking about on this show. So today, I want to get back into, and maybe we'll call it quits on Atlantis after tonight, unless something spectacular comes along. But I wanted to look at a couple of aspects that we haven't covered with Atlantis, which we've been covering over the last few days. And I want to talk about, and we mentioned it yesterday, the legendary Hyperborea, there we go, and the ancient Greeks. Who really discovered America is the big kind of question behind this. And so, in his story of Atlantis, which we already have covered, was written around 360 BCE, Plato mentioned a grand island or continent across the Atlantic, one that was larger, quote, larger than Libya and Asia combined. And this continent was so enormous, he said, it encompassed or wrapped around the Atlantic Ocean. And is it possible that Plato was talking about America and the American continent, not that of Atlantis, as many automatically assume when they read that story for the first time. So let's not ignore that many scholars, researchers also show that proper translation of Plato's text places Atlantis in the Mediterranean and not in the Atlantic. We talked about that yesterday with the Cyclades. and Santorini and all of those places, Santorini. And there was, or some other exotic location. And of course, we had all different kinds of theories about where Atlantis was. So aside from those claims, though, it's conceivable to accept that the ancient Greeks around the 4th century BC knew of the American continent across the Atlantic. Is that possible? Did they know of America that far back? We think of America as a transatlantic crossing, but what if it was a different kind of crossing the Atlantic that got people to the American shores, North America as a continent? Interestingly, several clues have suggested this may not be such an outlandish assumption at all. So roughly 20 years ago, in about 1996, thereabouts, 24 years ago, Mark McMenamin, and we've mentioned him before, a professor of geology at Mount Holyoke College in the United States, discovered and interpreted a series of enigmatic markings on the reverse side of a Carthaginian gold coin that was minted around 350 BCE as an ancient map of the world. Now, I got to tell you, I looked at this coin and I didn't quite see the map, but he was interpreting certain markings on it. I'm going to show you a picture of this coin. Let's see. Let me get over here. I know I've got it in here. Looking for the coin. Gold coin right here. Here we go. You ready? This is the Carthaginian gold coin from 350 BCE. Now, this Mark McMenamin, Menamin, there you go, McMenamin, Mark McMenamin. A lot of M's in his name. He's a professor. He looked at this coin and he thought there were some enigmatic markings on it. And what he saw in this was an ancient map of the world. And in the center of this world map, there's a clear depiction of the Mediterranean basin. An image to the right, now the coin on the right, is interpreted as to represent Asia, while the image on the left is interpreted to represent the American continent. Now, Professor McMenamin also found that all known specimens of this type of coin form the same type of world map. And this is kind of an interesting discovery, no doubt, but what's most interesting about this find is that this particular Carthaginian coin was minted within the same decade when Plato unveiled the story of Atlantis and revealed that there was a large continent across from the Pillars of Hercules. Now, that to me, I look at that coin, I got to tell you, I don't see it. He's seeing something I don't see. Do you see it? You got about 2 seconds and you're not going to see it at all anymore. Boom. All right, so that's gone. And folks, for those of you just listening, there was a horse on the backside and a woman's face, and tangled hair on the front side of the coin. So I don't know if you saw the makings of a map there. Maybe we'd have to study that a little more and research it a little bit more. But there's another map I want to show you as well. It's called the Piri-Reis map. And that's P-I-R-I. There's one word, Reis, R-E-I-S, the Piri-Reis or Piri-Reis map. And let me show you that map. There it is, boom. It's turned on its side here, kind of, because the layout is going to be a little different than you might be accustomed to. Look at that for a second. The Piri-Reis world map, named after its maker, a Turkish admiral, he was a renowned cartographer. He was in the 1400s. Early 1500s. He drew this map in 1513, and this was only 2 decades after the discovery, quote-unquote, of America by Christopher Columbus. And he depicts the west coast of Africa and Europe, as well as the entire American continent on the Atlantic side. Now, according to Piri-Reis, however, his controversial map was based on several other charts, many dating as early as the 4th century BCE. And while by any means the famous map doesn't come close to a satellite image, it still probably depicts the continents of both sides of the Atlantic, although with one major flaw. It shows the Horn of South America turning sharply eastward. almost at a 90-degree angle, as if the South America wraps around the Atlantic at the bottom of the map. And of course, some go on to speculate that the horizontal body of that land could be that of Antarctica. So thus the controversy, since Antarctica was not discovered until about 300 years later. But if you look at this map as it's displayed here, you can see that the way I've got the map tilted, you're looking east is on the top, west is on the bottom, north is on the left, and south is on the right. So you see that landmass that goes all the way around at the bottom of the map, over on the right-hand side, and it goes up. That's got South America turning. Well, that might be Antarctica. But if you look over here, you've got, he shows both coasts of Europe and Africa and the Americas encompassing the Atlantic Ocean. Look at that map for a second, and it's gone. All right, so while the controversy in the Pierce-Reese map signifies significantly diminishes without Antarctica in it, the existence of this map still helps reinforce a couple of assumptions that were made earlier. And that's, let me find my place in my notes here. Sorry. I'm looking at maps, I'm looking at other graphics that I have. It reinforces the suggestion that Plato in 360 BCE could have been aware of the American continent in order to include it in his story, just by the cartography on this map. And it's also possible that the apparent flaw on the Pierce-Reese map, which most likely also appeared in the much older originals, explains why Plato was under the false impression that the immense continent across from the Pillars of Hercules encompassed or wrapped around the Atlantic Ocean, just as in the Northern Hemisphere, where North America, along with Greenland, Iceland, and a few other islands, seems to encompass the North Atlantic. So what was Plato referring to? Was it the ring of island continents, a big island, Greenland, Iceland, over to North America, and then the older maps that said that South America, they were actually seeing Antarctica? Was this the big landmass that he said wrapped around the Atlantic Ocean once you left the Pillars of Hercules? And of course, that wasn't like, hours later or days later. It took 3 weeks sometimes, a month to cross the Atlantic if you went straight across, unless you sailed and you went up in the islands, from Scotland, Ireland, Scotland, up into Iceland, Greenland, and all the way around to Newfoundland and places like that. So, now enter this whole idea of the legendary Hyperborea. Additional clues not only suggest that the ancient Greeks knew of North America across the Atlantic, but as it appears they were also very familiar with the region around the Arctic Circle, and in essence the broken bridge that connects Northern Europe to North America. And they called this land Hyperborea. And in the Greek, hyper means extreme. And Borea, think of the aurora borealis, the lights in the north. It means extremely north. It's all Hyperborea meant. And so is this possible that the Greeks knew of America, the American continent? I don't see it at all as technologically impossible for the Greeks who have sailed, island hopped, and eventually found North America. I don't think, not a discovery like we've discovered a continent, but they, in all their explorations, ran into North America. And so while undoubtedly skeptics are going to dismiss the suggestion, interestingly, the Greeks believed that Hyperborea was this unspoiled territory so far north from Greece that the sun there never sets. Now, I know you get that you can go into Norway and the sun doesn't set at night at certain times of the year, and it's certainly in the Arctic Circle. So, of course, the only place due north where the sun continuously shines at least 6 months out of the year, is a region above the Arctic Circle. It's a territory obviously not easily accessible, especially during the winter months. And coincidentally, the poet Pindar, from 522 BC to 443 BC, he wrote that neither by ship nor on foot would you find the marvelous road to the assembly of the Hyperboreans. Now, this is a statement that further corroborates the inaccessibility of the region, but he also mentions Hyperborea in, the 4th century BCE. So when bearing in mind this place's location somewhere extremely north, the fact is it's somewhere where the sun never sets. And this is a region inaccessible by foot or by boat, most likely due to a frozen Arctic Ocean. And so where else can a place like this be? Can Hyperborea have been the figment of a vivid imagination? Or is it possible, just possible, folks, that there was some truth to this story? As in the case of other stories brought to us from ancient Greece, which involved real places wrapped in mythical elements. And such, among others, was the Palace of Knossos, which was, this is Knossos, Knossos, which was associated with the Minotaur, a mythical beast of half man and half bull, and the city of Troy, which was connected to the epic war fought by the demigods, and Mount Olympus, which was thought to be occupied by the gods. And what about Hyperborea? Is it possible that the Greeks managed to navigate so far north, or was that the knowledge passed down to them from other such places, from others such as the Minoans? Maybe pass this information on. I'm going to show you a little graphic here, one more for tonight. And again, if you are, we may have thrown this up yesterday, and I'm not sure if we did or not. Let's see. What did I call that? Island hopping. Boom. There it is. Now, take a look at this map, and I've got this where Africa is down in the lower left, and you see the Mediterranean there, and you see Greece on the lower right, and the blue dotted line. If you follow that, the theory is that they sailed through the Mediterranean. There you see the boot of Italy, and they go out, and you see Spain and Morocco, and you see the Pillars of Hercules, which is the Straits of Gibraltar. They sail out of the Mediterranean, and they go north, and they sail between Ireland and what would be Britain at the time. So England on the south and Scotland on the north. You see Scotland on this map is mentioned. So they sail through what is now the Irish Sea, and they go to the Orkney Islands, which is north of Scotland. Then they jump from those to the Faroe Islands. And then they go to Iceland, and then they go to Greenland, and then they sail around Greenland, and whoa, they're over in Canada. And you can see how this possible route existed for the Greeks to explore. Now, if you look at the gray area that is at the top right, the top middle to the top right of this little globe, that grayed out area, that is Hyperborea. That's when it's frozen over. And so they had this kind of landmass that was there that encompassed Greenland and all the broken land up north of Canada and the North American continent. So, if according to historians, the Bronze Age Minoans, 4,000 years ago, we're talking in the 2000s BCE, were often traveling as far as Scotland and the Orkney Islands to trade goods, is it inconceivable to assume that over time, going back and forth for 1,000 years, that they may have eventually reached Greenland, the edge of Hyperborea, and only a couple of short island stops away? And if those ancient navigators managed to reach Greenland via island hopping, is it possible then to assume, look at that map again, that they could not have gone a bit further and ultimately reached North America? And could they have done this still keeping land in sight as they're sailing because of the Hyperborean ice plate, Greenland and sailing over. Is that possible? And if they managed to reach Greenland, is it impossible to say they couldn't have gone and reached North America, which is in essence just around the corner for them? All right, so look at that, and I'm going to take it down here now. So there you go. There's a possible route that says, and look, the distance between Greenland and Canada, northern North America, isn't all that far, especially if you've got this ice cap that they're following, this iced over Hyperborea. So there you go. All right, now that's possible. Maybe the ancient Greeks were here, and we did talk about that last night. And so there's clues that are all around the world that kind of support this theory. And if not, if the Minoans didn't reach Greenland and North America, if not, where did thousands of tons of copper from the region around the Great Lakes disappear to during the Bronze Age? Most importantly, how did spices, plants, and insects indigenous only to America find themselves in Santorini, a Minoan island, around the period of 1600 BCE? An excavation in the ancient city of Akrotiri on the island of Santorini revealed that a tobacco beetle, and I don't know if I'm even going to try it at its genus name, the Lasoderma sericoma, an insect indigenous to America at the time, was found buried under the volcanic ash of the 1600 BC eruption. So if tobacco wasn't introduced to Europeans until around 1518 AD, as history claims, nearly 3,000 years later, how else did this pest of stored tobacco get there? And furthermore, how were the Egyptians able to obtain tobacco and other plants indigenous to America, like cocoa leaves, which were often used during mummification? Indeed, in 1992, German studies revealed that 1/3 of all mummies tested carried traces of nicotine on their hair, their skins, and their bones. Also, the same tobacco beetle found in Santorini was found inside the mummy of King Ramses II. He was from the 1213 BCE, and so as well as inside King Tut's tomb from the 1300s BCE. So you have to follow this genetic trail. If our early Mediterranean ancestors didn't know of North America 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, how then did haplogroup X, which we mentioned last night, a Mediterranean gene, find itself in North America around that time frame and at the time frame that Plato claimed? And for those not familiar with genetics, here we go. Here's a little science lesson for you. This has nothing to do with coronavirus, like the first half. But if you're not familiar with genetics, every race, each race around the planet, is categorized by scientists according to their particular DNA haplogroup. For example, all American Indians contain haplogroups A, B, and C, and D. As haplogroups A, C, and D are also found primarily in Asia, and B mainly in China and Japan, it's highly speculated by anthropologists that these four haplogroups traveled to North America during a glacial period when continents were once connected by ice. And so Native Americans, that's why we say they have Asian blood in them. You know, there's an interesting story that just popped into my head on this just now. I went to a small Bible college in the late 1970s, early 1980s, and it was very strict, fundamental, conservative, Baptist, and the rules were very strict. And by today's standard, you would call some of them racist, xenophobic. There was dating rules there and regulations. You couldn't date, you couldn't touch, you couldn't kiss, you couldn't do any of that. You had to have chaperones, you had to have permission of the dean. So it was a very, very strictly run college that we all willingly put ourselves in, believing that that was the right place to be. But that aside, I had a friend who was of Asian descent. Not a close friend, but I knew him pretty well. And he was fell in love with a white girl on the campus. Boy, this sounds like a bad movie, doesn't it? Or maybe a good movie. Fell in love with a white girl. Well, they started dating, but lo and behold, the college told them they were not allowed to date if they were going to be students there, because the college did not allow interracial dating. Get that. This is the college I went to, and the college I left, by the way, that I withdrew from, for many reasons, that being one of the things in the pool, the stew. And then they found that the white girl, they did some DNA testings privately. I don't know how they did this. I don't think it was DNA. I think it was through her family tree. Found that there was Asian in her blood. And it was actually one of the dean of women that knew these people. There was a friend of mine, mother of a friend of mine, that aided in helping this situation out. And they found that because she had a mix of Asian blood, even though she didn't look Asian at all, she had Asian in her DNA, that she was able to make a case that they could date because they both had Asian blood in them. And they were both from this haplo A, B, C, and D group. And so that story is a totally different thing that we could talk about and get angry about and all of that. And that was as late as 1979 when that happened. That was 40 years ago. So in a Baptist Bible college. So anyway, let's get back to this because we're soon, believe it or not, we're going to run out of time. It's highly speculated by anthropologists that these four haplogroups, A, B, C, and D, traveled to North America. So that's where that bloodline, that genetics comes into play. And more recent study, though, on certain Native American tribes, especially those around the Great Lakes, revealed that in addition to above haplogroups, they were also found to carry haplogroup X. By the way, back to that story from my college days, that's what it was. And because I just remembered this as we were doing this show. She had Native American blood in her, even though she appeared to be Caucasian. She had Native American blood, and they found that Native American blood contained the right genetics. And so they were able to make their case. And by the way, they were eventually allowed to date, but with much consternation by the school. Now, that's the people who ran the school at the time. So those around the Great Lakes, the Native American peoples, revealed that in addition to the above haplogroups of A, B, C, D, they were also found to carry haplogroup X. And if Middle Easterners somehow made it to America, haplogroup X is Middle Eastern. And if Middle Easterners somehow made it to America 10,000 years ago, why do only the tribes around the Great Lakes carry this particular gene? And most importantly, how did the Mediterranean people travel to North America? So again, if the Minoans were here mining copper in the Great Lakes, and you find that the Native American tribes around the Great Lakes are the only ones that contain this haplogroup X, how did the Mediterranean people travel to North America? And so if this is some random transfer, as some scientists maintain, and you have to see the Santorini hypothesis, which we're not covering tonight, why did no other haplogroup from at least a dozen in Europe at the time not follow X? As the four Asian haplogroups on the opposite side of the map ultimately followed each other via the Bering Strait. And is it possible that haplogroup X navigated to North America in a contained environment as Plato claimed? Or is it possible that the majority of anthropologists suggest 10,000 years ago Mediterranean people walked in America while ice still connected the Asian and the American continents at the Bering Strait? And so there are problems with this, and we don't have time to cover it because we're at the end of the show, and I'm going to run out of time. So, folks, I hope you found this stuff interesting. 23-hour break. We'll be back tomorrow night. Sit tight.